The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Clarence's house as Tom Parker Bowles adjusted his tie one final time. He had rehearsed his words countless times, each iteration growing bolder than the last. Today would be different. Today, he would make his case directly to the future king. Tom had grown up in the peculiar position of being adjacent to royalty without truly belonging to it. His mother, Camilla, had transformed from the woman who married his father into the Duchess of Cornwall, and eventually, the Queen Consort. Yet despite this elevation, Tom and his sister Laura remained firmly outside the golden circle of succession and royal privilege. The past months had been particularly difficult. While his mother attended state banquets and toured Commonwealth nations, Tom found himself struggling with his food-writing career and mounting financial pressures. He watched as Prince William's children received titles, properties, and trust funds that would secure their futures for generations. The disparity had begun to eat at him. His request for a private meeting with Prince William had surprised everyone, including his mother. Camilla had tried to dissuade him, warning that some boundaries should not be crossed. But Tom's determination had only grown stronger. He believed that as the son of the Queen Consort, he deserved more than just an invitation to the occasional garden party. The meeting was set for a Tuesday afternoon in one of Kensington Palace's smaller drawing rooms. Tom arrived early, his palms sweating despite the cool autumn air. A footman showed him to the designated room, where portraits of previous monarchs gazed down with seeming disapproval. When Prince William entered, his expression was cordial but guarded. The Prince of Wales had agreed to this meeting out of respect for Camilla, but his body language suggested he knew this conversation would be challenging. Tom began carefully, thanking William for his time and acknowledging the unusual nature of his request. He spoke of family, of the new dynamics created by his mother's marriage to the king. Then, gradually, he moved to the heart of the matter. He wanted recognition, not just as Camilla's son, but as a member of the extended royal family. Tom laid out his vision. A royal title, perhaps a dukedom, that would acknowledge his unique position. He spoke of financial support, suggesting that as the Queen Consort's son, he should receive an annual stipend from the Duchy of Cornwall. He even proposed taking on royal duties, representing the crown at certain events. William listened without interruption, his blue eyes growing colder with each passing moment. Tom, emboldened by the silence, pressed further. He mentioned how his children were the Queen Consort's grandchildren, how they deserved the security and opportunities that came with royal connection. He spoke of fairness, of modernizing the monarchy to reflect blended families. The room fell silent when Tom finished. William's fingers drummed once on the armrest of his chair before he stood. His response, when it came, was delivered with the measured authority of someone who had been prepared for kingship since birth. William reminded Tom that the monarchy operated on centuries of precedent and constitutional law, not on personal desires or modern interpretations of fairness. He explained that royal titles were not participation trophies to be handed out to extended family members. The line of succession, the distribution of royal duties, and the allocation of funds from the various duchies were all governed by strict protocols that had nothing to do with hurt feelings or perceived slights. The Prince of Wales's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the velvet. He pointed out that Tom had enjoyed privileges many could only dream of. Access to the highest circles of society, business opportunities that came from his connections, and the reflected prestige of his mother's position. These were not insignificant benefits. William then addressed the elephant in the room with characteristic directness. Tom's mother had married into the royal family, but that did not make Tom royal. Just as Catherine's siblings were not granted titles or royal status, neither would Camilla's children. The monarchy could not survive if it expanded to include every relative by marriage. The conversation grew more heated as Tom pushed back, arguing that his situation was different. His mother wasn't just any royal spouse. She was the Queen Consort. Surely that warranted special consideration. He even hinted at the unfairness of his mother's long wait and the challenges she had faced, suggesting that extending recognition to her children would be a form of restorative justice. This was a step too far. William's expression hardened as he reminded Tom that the past was the past, and that his mother's current position was a privilege, not a platform for negotiating additional benefits for her family. The Prince of Wales made it clear that the royal family had welcomed Camilla and shown her children every appropriate courtesy. Demanding more was not only inappropriate but potentially damaging to the very institution Tom claimed to want to serve. As the meeting drew to a close, Tom made one final attempt. He spoke of loyalty, of discretion, of all the things he and his family had done to support Camilla through difficult times. The implication hung in the air like a threat, that their continued silence and support might depend on receiving what they felt they deserved. William's response to this veiled threat was swift and unequivocal. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting, and delivered what palace insiders would later describe as a masterclass in royal authority. The Prince of Wales informed Tom that loyalty to the crown was not a transaction. It was not something to be bartered or sold to the highest bidder. The monarchy's strength lay in its adherence to duty and service, not in satisfying the personal ambitions of those who happened to be related to its members by marriage. Furthermore, William made it crystal clear that any attempt to leverage family position for personal gain would be met with the full weight of royal displeasure. The palace had ways of distancing itself from those who threatened its stability or reputation. Tom and his sister had thus far enjoyed warm relations with the royal family, invitations to major events, and the social cachet that came with being Camilla's children. All of that could change if they chose to pursue this path. The meeting ended with Tom leaving Kensington Palace in a state of shock and humiliation. He had expected negotiation, perhaps even sympathy. Instead, he had received what amounted to a royal edict: be grateful for what you have, and ask for nothing more. News of the meeting, despite all parties' attempts at discretion, began to filter through royal circles. Camilla was mortified when she learned the full extent of her son's demands. She had worked for years to build bridges, to prove herself worthy of her position, and to show that she understood the boundaries between her personal family and her royal duties. Tom's bold overreach threatened to undo that careful balance. The king, when informed of the situation, supported his son's handling of the matter completely. He had great affection for Tom and Laura, but that affection did not extend to rewriting the rules of monarchy to accommodate their ambitions. The firm line drawn by William was not just about rejecting Tom's specific demands. It was about setting a precedent for the future. In the days that followed, Tom found himself persona non grata in certain circles. Invitations that might have come his way were quietly redirected elsewhere. Business associates who had once been eager to trade on his royal connections became noticeably cooler. The message was clear without being stated. The royal family protected its own interests, and those who challenged its boundaries did so at their own risk. Meanwhile, William's decisive handling of the situation enhanced his reputation within the palace and among constitutional experts. Here was a future king who understood that the monarchy's survival depended on maintaining clear lines between those who served the institution and those who merely benefited from proximity to it. His response to Tom's demands showed that he would not allow personal relationships or emotional appeals to override constitutional precedent. The incident also served to clarify Camilla's position within the family. While she was respected and supported as queen consort, her children would remain private citizens. This was not a punishment or a slight, it was simply the natural order of things. The monarchy could not afford to expand its definition of who was royal, particularly in an era when public support for the institution required careful management of its size and cost. Royal historians would later point to this confrontation as a defining moment in William's preparation for kingship. It demonstrated his understanding that being a constitutional monarch required saying no more often than saying yes, and that protecting the institution sometimes meant disappointing those who felt entitled to more than tradition allowed. For Tom Parker Bowles, the rejection was a harsh lesson in the realities of royal life. His mother might wear a crown, but that crown's weight and privileges were hers alone. He and his sister would have to content themselves with being the children of the queen consort, a position that brought certain social advantages but no claim whatsoever to royal rank or fortune. The palace's message had been delivered with crystalline clarity. The monarchy was not a family business where relatives could demand positions and perks. It was a constitutional institution, with fixed rules and boundaries. Those who respected these boundaries would find themselves welcomed at garden parties and state occasions. Those who challenged them would discover just how cold royal displeasure could be. In the months that followed, Tom retreated from public view, focusing on his food writing and avoiding any mention of his royal connections in interviews. The bold demands that had seemed so reasonable in his own mind had been met with a shutdown so complete that it left no room for misunderstanding. The future king had spoken, and his word was final. This early test of William's resolve would prove instructive for others who might harbor similar ambitions. The Prince of Wales had shown that he would guard the monarchy's boundaries with the same determination his grandmother had displayed throughout her long reign. Personal feelings, family connections, and emotional appeals would not sway him from his duty to protect the institution he would one day lead. The weeks following the confrontation at Kensington Palace brought unexpected consequences that rippled through the royal household like waves after a stone thrown into still water. Tom Parker Bowles had retreated to his London home, nursing his wounded pride and trying to make sense of the comprehensive rejection he had received. But silence and acceptance were not in his nature, and what happened next would test the monarchy's resolve in ways no one had anticipated. It began with whispers at private dinner parties. Tom, still smarting from William's rebuke, had begun sharing his version of events with select friends. In his telling, he had made a reasonable request for recognition of his unique position, only to be met with cold indifference and threats. He spoke of the sacrifices his mother had made, the years of public humiliation she had endured, and how the royal family now expected her children to remain invisible despite her elevation to queen consort. These conversations, initially confined to trusted circles, began to spread. London society loved nothing more than royal gossip, and the story of Tom's confrontation with William was too delicious to keep quiet. Each retelling added new details, new grievances, until the narrative had transformed into something far more dramatic than the actual meeting. Within the palace, the communications team watched with growing concern as rumors began appearing in gossip columns. Nothing concrete enough to act upon, but sufficient to create an atmosphere of tension. William, briefed on the developing situation, maintained his position that no response was necessary. He had been clear with Tom, and palace policy was not to engage with speculation, but Tom's campaign for sympathy was just beginning. Unable to accept the finality of William's rejection, he had convinced himself that if he could not receive recognition through proper channels, perhaps public pressure might force a reconsideration. It was a dangerous game, one that showed how little he understood about the institution his mother had married into. The first major escalation came through a carefully orchestrated interview with a sympathetic journalist. Tom didn't directly criticize the royal family. He was too clever for that. Instead, he spoke eloquently about the challenges of being a modern blended family, and how traditional institutions sometimes struggled to adapt to contemporary realities. He mentioned his children, how they called the king grandpa but would never be acknowledged as royal grandchildren. The interview was a masterpiece of implication without accusation. The palace's response was swift and subtle. Invitations to upcoming royal events that might have included Tom and his sister were quietly adjusted. The Christmas reception at Windsor, which they had attended for the past several years, somehow forgot to include their names. When Camilla questioned these omissions, she was told it was simply a matter of space and numbers. But she knew better. Her son's maneuvering was costing him the very access he claimed to deserve. Frustrated by the palace's refusal to engage, Tom made his next move. He began working on a book proposal, a memoir about growing up with a mother who would become queen. Publishers, sensing the potential for revelations and insider gossip, expressed immediate interest. Word of the project reached the palace through their network of contacts in the publishing world. This development triggered an emergency meeting at Clarence House. The king, accompanied by William and their private secretaries, sat down with Camilla for what insiders described as one of the most difficult conversations of her royal life. The message was blunt. Tom's behavior was becoming a threat to the stability and dignity of the crown. While they understood a mother's love for her children, Camilla needed to make clear to her son that his current path would lead to complete estrangement from the royal family. Camilla left that meeting in tears. She had worked so hard to balance her two worlds, her life as a mother and her role as queen consort. Now her son's ambitions were forcing her to choose. The conversation she had with Tom that evening was unlike any they had ever had. She pleaded with him to abandon the book, to stop the briefings, to accept his position with grace. But Tom, feeling betrayed by what he saw as his mother choosing them over him, refused to back down. The situation escalated further when Tom appeared at a charity gala and, after several drinks, began holding court with tales of royal life. His stories walked the line between humor and indiscretion, painting a picture of a family more concerned with protocol than people. One guest, recording on their phone, captured Tom suggesting that the monarchy's days were numbered if it couldn't evolve to recognize modern family structures. This video, posted on social media, went viral within hours. Royal correspondents, who had been following the story with interest, now had something concrete to report. The morning papers ran with headlines about Queen's son attacks royal family and palace rift over recognition. William's response to this public embarrassment was delivered not through words but through actions. Every pathway of royal access that had remained open to Tom was systematically closed. Security clearances for palace events were revoked. The informal briefings that Camilla sometimes shared about royal matters were now carefully filtered to ensure no sensitive information could be leaked. Even family photographs for official occasions were arranged to minimize Tom's visibility. More significantly, William authorized his legal team to send a formal letter to Tom's literary agent. While carefully worded, the message was unmistakable. Any memoir containing private information about the royal family would be met with all available legal remedies. The palace had tolerated much, but they would not allow their private conversations and family moments to become publishing fodder. The business consequences for Tom were immediate and severe. Companies that had previously engaged him for his food expertise began reconsidering their associations. The subtle influence of palace disapproval made itself felt in boardrooms and editorial offices. Tom found his media appearances drying up, his consultancy requests declining, and his social capital evaporating. Watching her son's world crumble, Camilla made one last attempt at reconciliation. She arranged a private meeting between Tom and the king, hoping that Charles's more empathetic nature might find a solution. But the king, while personally sympathetic, was unbending on the constitutional issues. He explained to Tom that the monarchy survived by maintaining clear boundaries, and that personal feelings could not override institutional requirements. The king also delivered a history lesson that Tom needed to hear. He spoke of previous consorts whose families had sought to capitalize on royal connections, and how those attempts had always ended badly. The monarchy protected itself not out of cruelty but out of necessity. Every exception created a precedent. Every precedent became an expectation, and expectations led to entitlement that the institution could not sustain. Charles offered Tom a choice. Accept his position as a private citizen who happened to be the Queen Consort's son, enjoying the social benefits that naturally flowed from that connection, or continue his current path and face complete exclusion from royal life. There would be no middle ground, no negotiation, no special arrangements. The meeting ended with Tom making what appeared to be a concession. He agreed to halt the book project and stop his public commentary on royal matters. In return, he asked only that the informal freeze on his attendance at family events be lifted. The king agreed, but with conditions. Any future breach of trust would result in permanent exclusion, not just for Tom but potentially for his sister Laura as well. For a brief period, it seemed the crisis had passed. Tom returned to his food writing, carefully avoiding any mention of his royal connections. He attended his mother's birthday celebration, where William greeted him with cool civility. The palace machinery, always efficient at managing awkward situations, created an appearance of normalcy. But beneath the surface, resentments festered. Tom had been forced to abandon his ambitions, but he had not forgotten them. He began keeping a detailed diary, documenting every slight, real or imagined. He noted which events he was excluded from, which photographs he was cropped out of, which family moments he was not invited to share. This record-keeping was not for immediate use but for a future time when the consequences might be less severe. William, aware through palace intelligence of Tom's activities, recognized the long-term threat. In private conversations with his father, he advocated for maintaining strict boundaries. The Prince of Wales understood that Tom represented a new kind of challenge to the monarchy, not from Republicans or critics, but from those who claimed to love the institution while seeking to exploit it. The broader royal family watched these developments with interest and some concern. Other non-royal relatives, who had long accepted their positions with grace, wondered if Tom's aggressive approach might inspire others to seek more than tradition allowed. The Princess Royal, never one to mince words, reportedly told a friend that Tom had shown spectacular stupidity in challenging the system that had already given him more than most could dream of. Meanwhile, the public watched the drama unfold with mixed reactions. Some sympathized with Tom, seeing him as a victim of an outdated system that refused to acknowledge modern family dynamics. Others supported William's firm stance, recognizing that the monarchy's survival depended on maintaining clear boundaries. Social media debates raged over whether blood or marriage should determine royal status. Constitutional experts weighed in with historical precedents and legal arguments. They pointed out that Tom's demands, if granted, would open floodgates that could not be closed. If the queen consort's children received titles and stipends, what about the children of future consorts? What about stepchildren, adopted children, or children from previous relationships? The monarchy's strict rules existed precisely to avoid these complications. The crisis had revealed fundamental truths about the modern monarchy. It was an institution caught between its historical roots and contemporary pressures, trying to remain relevant while maintaining traditions that seemed increasingly arbitrary to some. William's handling of Tom's demands showed that the future king understood this balance and was prepared to make hard decisions to protect it. For Camilla, the situation remained a source of private anguish. She had achieved the position she had long desired, but at a cost she had not fully anticipated. Her son's public humiliation and subsequent exclusion from parts of royal life created a wound that would not easily heal. She performed her duties with customary grace, but those close to her noticed a new sadness in her eyes. Tom, for his part, settled into a bitter acceptance of his fate. He continued his career, avoided royal topics in public, and attended the family events to which he was invited. But the warmth that had once existed between him and his stepfamily had been replaced by formal politeness. He had learned that challenging the monarchy came with a price, one that he would continue paying for years to come. The incident became a case study in royal management, demonstrating how the modern monarchy dealt with internal threats. William had shown that while he would be a compassionate king, he would not be a weak one. The boundaries he defended were not just lines on a map but the very foundations that kept the institution stable in turbulent times. The final chapter of the confrontation between Tom Parker Bowles and Prince William began on a certain rain-soaked evening in London, nearly a year after their initial meeting at Kensington Palace. Time had not healed the wounds but had instead allowed them to fester into something more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. What started as one man's misguided ambition would culminate in a defining moment for the monarchy's future. Tom had maintained his public silence as promised, but privately, he had been building a case. His diary had grown into multiple volumes, each entry meticulously documenting what he perceived as systematic exclusion and punishment for daring to ask for recognition. He had collected photographs showing him pushed to the margins at royal events, compiled guest lists that excluded his name, and preserved every slight, real or imagined. Unknown to the palace, Tom had been in secret negotiations with a streaming service about a documentary series exploring life on the periphery of royalty. Unlike his abandoned book project, this would not directly attack the royal family but would instead present a sympathetic portrait of those who lived in the shadows of crowns they could never wear. It was a clever approach, designed to generate public sympathy while maintaining plausible deniability about his intentions. The project might have proceeded without palace knowledge if not for a junior production assistant who happened to be dating someone in the royal communications team. Word of the documentary reached William just as filming was about to begin. The Prince of Wales's reaction was swift and decisive, but this time, he would handle matters differently. Instead of another private confrontation, William chose to act through institutional channels. The Lord Chamberlain's office issued a formal statement clarifying that no member of the extended royal family was authorized to participate in commercial ventures that traded on their royal connections without explicit palace approval. While Tom was not named, the timing left no doubt about the statement's target. This public rebuke stung Tom more than any private conversation could have. He had been careful to avoid direct criticism of the royal family. Yet here they were, publicly questioning his integrity. In his mind, this was persecution for the crime of being the queen consort's son. The accumulated resentment of the past year finally boiled over. Tom's response came in the form of a carefully crafted opinion piece published in a major newspaper, titled, "The Modern Monarchy's Medieval Mindset." It was a masterwork of passive aggression. He wrote eloquently about institutions that failed to evolve, about the human cost of rigid traditions, and about the pain of watching one's mother choose duty over family. He never mentioned William by name, but every line dripped with personal grievance. The article sent shockwaves through royal circles. Here was the queen consort's son publicly criticizing the institution his mother served. The implications were enormous. If Camilla could not control her own children, what did that say about her position? If the monarchy could not maintain unity within its own extended family, how could it claim to unite the nation? William's advisors urged a strong response. But the Prince of Wales had learned from his grandmother's example. Never complain, never explain, had served the late queen well, and he would not abandon that principle now. Instead, he authorized a different kind of response, one that would demonstrate the consequences of breaking faith with the crown. The Duchy of Cornwall, now under William's control, conducted a review of all its business relationships. Coincidentally, several companies that had contracts with Tom's food consultancy business found their royal warrants under scrutiny. Nothing was explicitly stated, but the message was clear. Association with those who challenged the crown carried risks. Meanwhile, Camilla found herself in an impossible position. Her son's public criticism had created a crisis that threatened her own standing. The king, while supportive, made it clear that she needed to address the situation. The conversation between mother and son that followed was perhaps the most painful of Camilla's life. She arrived at Tom's home unannounced, her protection officers waiting discreetly outside. What followed was not a royal addressing a subject but a mother confronting her child about choices that were tearing their family apart. Camilla did not plead or negotiate. Instead, she presented Tom with a stark reality. His actions were not just affecting his relationship with the royal family but were undermining everything she had worked to achieve. Every criticism he made, every grievance he aired, reflected on her judgment and her suitability as queen consort. He was not fighting William or the institution. He was destroying his own mother's legacy. Tom, confronted with this perspective, tried to justify his actions. He spoke of fairness, of recognition, of the natural human desire to be acknowledged. But Camilla, with tears in her eyes, delivered a truth he had refused to see. The monarchy was not about personal gratification or individual recognition. It was about service, duty, and sacrifice. She had accepted these terms when she married the king, and if Tom could not understand that, perhaps he should remove himself from royal life entirely. The ultimatum was clear. Cease all activities that could embarrass the crown or face complete estrangement, not just from the royal family but from his mother as well. Tom, shocked by the firmness of Camilla's stance, realized he had pushed too far. The documentary project was quietly cancelled, substantial financial penalties paid, and the production company signed ironclad non-disclosure agreements. But William was not satisfied with Tom's retreat. The Prince of Wales understood that lasting peace required more than just cessation of hostilities. It required a clear understanding of consequences. He arranged for one final meeting, this time on neutral ground at a private club in St. James's. The William who appeared at this meeting was different from the man Tom had confronted a year earlier. This was not just the Prince of Wales but the future king, carrying the full weight of institutional authority. He did not raise his voice or make threats. He simply laid out reality in terms that could not be misunderstood. Tom's actions had been noted and documented. Any future attempt to profit from royal connections, directly or indirectly, would result in legal action. Any breach of family confidence would be met with complete exclusion from all royal events, including his mother's future funeral. The monarchy had long memories and longer reaches. Tom could choose to be a supportive periphery member of the queen consort's family, or he could be nothing at all. William then did something unexpected. He acknowledged the difficulty of Tom's position, the challenges of living adjacent to an institution that would never fully embrace him. But he also reminded Tom of the privileges that position brought. The doors it opened, the opportunities it created, the social capital it provided. These benefits came with a single requirement: loyalty. Not subservience, not silence on all matters, but basic loyalty to the institution that provided them. The future king offered Tom a final chance at redemption: accept his position with grace, support his mother's role without seeking personal advantage, and maintain the dignity expected of someone connected to the crown. In return, Tom would find that many of the recent restrictions would quietly disappear. He would never be royal, but he could be a respected member of the extended royal family. Tom left that meeting understanding finally what he had failed to grasp before. The monarchy was not a family business where relatives could negotiate better terms. It was a constitutional entity with rules written in centuries of tradition and law. William had not been cruel in his rejections. He had been protecting something larger than any individual's ambitions. The transformation in Tom's behavior was immediate and complete. He withdrew from public commentary on all matters related to the royal family. His social media presence became focused entirely on food and culture, carefully avoiding any reference to his connections. When asked about his mother in interviews, he offered brief, supportive comments and quickly changed the subject. At royal events, Tom adopted a new approach. He arrived quietly, stayed in the background, and left without seeking attention. Palace staff, noting the change, gradually eased some of the restrictions that had been placed on his access. He was included in family photographs again, though always positioned appropriately at the periphery. The rapprochement was tested when a tabloid offered Tom a substantial sum for his story. The figure was life-changing, enough to solve all his financial concerns and secure his children's futures. Old Tom might have been tempted, might have rationalized that he could tell his story without damaging the institution, but the Tom who had been through the crucible of royal disapproval recognized the offer for what it was, a test of his rehabilitation. He not only rejected the offer but reported it to the palace communications team. This gesture of good faith did not go unnoticed. William, informed of Tom's decision, authorized a quiet word of appreciation to be passed along. It was not forgiveness, the wounds were too deep for that. But it was acknowledgement that Tom had finally understood his place in the royal ecosystem. As time passed, a new equilibrium emerged. Tom continued his career as a food writer and critic, successful on his own merits rather than his connections. He attended royal events when invited, playing the role of supportive family member without overreaching. His children grew up understanding that while their grandmother wore a crown, they were not princes or princesses, and that was perfectly acceptable. Camilla, relieved by the resolution, found her relationship with her son slowly healing. The trust that had been broken would never be fully restored, but a functional relationship emerged from the ashes of conflict. She could fulfill her royal duties without constantly worrying about what embarrassment might emerge from her children's actions. For William, the entire episode had been an education in kingship. He had learned that protecting the monarchy sometimes meant making enemies within one's own extended family. He had discovered that kindness could be interpreted as weakness, and that clarity, even when it seemed harsh, was often the greatest gift a leader could give. The confrontation between Tom Parker Bowles and Prince William became a watershed moment in defining the modern monarchy's boundaries. It established clear precedents for how the institution would handle similar challenges in the future. The message was unambiguous. The monarchy would welcome those who understood their place within its structure but would ruthlessly exclude those who sought to exploit it. Royal historians would later point to this episode as evidence of William's readiness to be king. He had shown strategic thinking in his response to Tom's escalating demands, emotional intelligence in understanding the family dynamics at play, and institutional loyalty in protecting the crown's interests above personal relationships. The story also illuminated the challenges facing the monarchy in an age of blended families and evolving social structures. The institution's strength lay in its continuity and tradition, but these same qualities could make it seem inflexible and unfeeling. William had managed to defend necessary boundaries while acknowledging the human cost of those defenses. Tom Parker Bowles's bold demands had been comprehensively shut down, but in a way that taught, rather than merely punished. He had learned that the monarchy was not an enemy to be conquered or a treasure to be plundered, but an institution to be respected and supported from whatever position one occupied in its orbit. The final lesson was perhaps the most profound. In the royal world, ambition without authorization was not just inappropriate but dangerous. The crown protected itself not through cruelty but through clarity, not through vendetta but through consistency. Those who accepted these terms found a place, however peripheral, in one of history's most enduring institutions. Those who challenged them discovered that royal displeasure, delivered with precision and authority, was a force that could reshape lives and redirect destinies. As Tom Parker Bowles returned to his quiet life as a food writer, occasionally glimpsed at royal gatherings but never again at their center, he embodied a truth that William had articulated with stunning finality. Proximity to the crown was a privilege, not a platform, and those who forgot this distinction did so at their peril. The monarchy would continue, as it always had, by knowing exactly who belonged within its golden circle and who would forever remain outside, looking in.